One of the things that's so fascinating about human beings is our capacity to believe anything, quite simply. And what's so interesting also is that based on our childhood and our society and the country we're born in and the age we were born in, we essentially develop paradigms and philosophies and value systems based on our childhood experience. You might have a childhood home, for example, where your mother and father are the absolute personification of never leaving no matter what, whether they're suffering through 3 decades of misery and no intimacy or not. And you believe that that is the way. And I've met and spoken to a number of people who have that exact philosophy of relating. It's very interesting that human beings are capable of creating paradigms. And what I mean by a paradigm is an all-encompassing worldview on a subject. If you're brought up in a home where there is no conversation about health, the only conversation about food is pleasure, then that might become the only paradigm you have. You might never notice a health book in a bookshop. You may never notice a health documentary when it's on Netflix, because there is no paradigm outside of food is for pleasure, for example. So when it comes to relationships, the wise person at some point says, I have an unconscious paradigm of relating that I did not choose, that I have inherited from my family and my society and the religion and the newspapers, and it's informed by that, and I'm unconscious to it, and I don't know what it is, and it's absolutely driving how I'm relating to the people that I love, and especially my intimate partner. It's a very important moment in a person's life to realize what I just said. I have an unconscious paradigm of how I'm supposed to relate. I didn't choose it. I've inherited it from people that were raised by people who lived through the 20th century. And I haven't considered it. And I'm just projecting it on my partner. The second logical step is, well, knowing everything I know today, what would my philosophy of relating be, consciously chosen, articulated, and written down? What really matters to me? What do I really care about? What do I want for my partner? What do I understand about maturation? And if I do understand anything about maturation, how can I have that be the center of my life and my relationship? In the old days, it used to be one model of relationship for everyone. Society dictated the vows. Society dictated the societal views on sex and how evil it was, and you mustn't have any of it before marriage and things like that. So it was one model for everyone. Society dictated a barely evolved over the years model of ownership and control. And it was the same model. Everybody had to agree by the same model. And slowly over the last sort of 20 or 30 years, we've been evolving into more options, which makes logical sense because it had to happen. But my take on it is, and how I work with my clients in my invitation of love work, is I essentially guide people through a process by which they get to create their own model of relationship for them, based on what is profound for them and everything they know about themselves. And if they're in a relationship, their relationship, and if they're not, the person that they would most like to be with next. Because that makes sense. It makes sense to create your own philosophy of relating, because then you know that it's conscious. You know that you chose it. You know that you're not running from an unconscious, inherited, hand-me-down model of relationships that you didn't choose, that your parents and grandparents possibly didn't choose. Because part of becoming conscious and aware is becoming conscious and aware of your philosophy of relating. Who do you want to be? And how do you want to show up? And if you do enter someone's life, how do you want to enter someone's life, and what difference do you want to make, and how do you want to show up? And what are you a no to? Part of becoming conscious and aware is finding your no, so that you can have clear boundaries and a clear standard. For example, a really clumsy example. I'm a no to chain smoking racists. I'm just a no. I don't even have to say it out loud. I just am. That's the clumsy, obvious example. I don't want to have a relationship with those two elements of the human condition, but there are more. So you have to find out what you're a no to. Some people are not a no to being slapped yet. You have to become a no, and you have to become a yes. But you can't know those things until you write them down and become conscious of them. So too many people, unfortunately, are operating in the most critical area of their lives, their most committed relationships, from an unconscious paradigm and philosophy of relationship. And it's not a difficult process. It's not particularly complicated. I mean, you could do it right now just by listening to this. You could just grab a pen and paper and say, okay, actually, what is my unconscious paradigm? What did I inherit? On one page, and on another page, write down what you really want and who you really want to be. Because when you do become conscious of your paradigm rating, it galvanizes a certain strength inside you. It gives you a certain authority within your own being because you know who you are. You know what you stand for. I think that's hugely important, particularly if you're planning on going into the full commitment realm of marriage and children and houses and mortgages and money and bills and dealing with in-laws and extended families. For sure, knowing what you truly stand for will support you tremendously. So I think those are the headlines. A lot of people, unfortunately, do not have a conscious, chosen philosophy on relationships. It's an unconscious, unchosen, inherited model. And the universe, through the process of the game of life and maturation, is going to bring up everything about your model of relationships that is inconsistent with a profound soul-based relationship. Because that's what the game of life does. It brings to your attention your flawed, inaccurate, and inappropriate decisions, beliefs, and assumptions that you've made about yourself and the world. So that's going to be challenging. Probably best to get that all in order as soon as possible. But just to remind you, if you're listening, the prime directive is to bring to your attention the inaccurate, flawed, and inappropriate decisions, beliefs, and assumptions that you've made about yourself and the world. And they're going to be brought to your attention through the medium of challenges, breakdowns, frustrations, divorces, bankruptcies, family homes separating, weekends ruined, the list goes on. The good news about that is when you understand that, you realize that the game in town is to improve the quality of your beliefs, decisions, and assumptions about yourself and the world. And the more you improve the accuracy and appropriateness of your internal world, the more your life will begin to work better. And that's the really good news. The game of life is quite possibly the best news of all because it explains how it works. But to summarize, your philosophy on relationships is hugely important because it shapes how you show up in the world.